One of the biggest challenges we face as doctors is localizing a stroke. And if there's one area that consistently throws us off, it's the brainstem. After all, the brainstem is packed with cranial nerves, nuclei, tracts, decussations, and all sorts of complex structures that turn it into a true anatomical maze. So it's no surprise that strokes involving the brainstem often present with a messy, confusing tangle of symptoms that's hard to figure out and even harder to remember. But what if there was a way to simplify all of this? Well, for decades now there's been a mnemonic called the Rule of Fours. It was first published by Dr. Peter Gates in the Internal Medicine Journal, and it's incredible because just by memorizing 4 simple phrases, you can diagnose most major brainstem stroke syndromes just like this. Now, the core idea behind this rule is that we can think of the brainstem like a map, with a vertical and a horizontal axis. On the vertical axis we have 3 levels: the midbrain, pons, and the medulla oblongata. On the horizontal axis we have the medial and lateral regions. The rule of 4 works by helping us easily recall what structures lie in each vertical level and each horizontal section. So let's say I'm evaluating a patient and I realize that the affected structures are medial and that the signs point to a midbrain level. Well, that's a medial midbrain stroke. It's that simple. Now, before we keep going, there's something important to clarify. This rule was made to simplify a complex topic, and like any simplification, it of course skips over some details. So if you're a hardcore brainstem neuroanatomy fan, just remember that this is meant to be a clinical tool, not a neurosurgical dissection manual, okay? Now, with that out of the way, let's talk about the first phrase in the Rule of Fours, which goes like this. There are 4 structures in the midline and they all start with an M. When these structures are affected, the result is a medial brainstem syndrome. These are number 1, the motor pathway, number 2, the medial lemniscus, number 3, the medial longitudinal fasciculus, and number 4, the motor nuclei of some cranial nerves. Let's go through them. First, we have the motor pathway, specifically what we call the corticospinal tract. What you need to know about this is that when damaged, the patient will have contralateral weakness in the arm and leg. Then we have the medial lemniscus. Regarding this, you should remember that when affected, it causes contralateral, again, loss of vibration and proprioception. Next is the medial longitudinal fasciculus. When damaged, it causes ipsilateral internuclear ophthalmoplegia. Just in case you forgot, it looks like this. When the patient looks towards the side of the lesion, both eyes move fine. But if they look away towards the opposite side, the eye on the side of the lesion can't adduct properly. It gets stuck kinda halfway. And remember, this is an ipsilateral finding. The first 2 were contralateral. Finally, the motor nuclei of some cranial nerves, specifically cranial nerves 3, 4, 6, and 12. I'll show you a great way to remember this in just a minute. So if you think about it, 3 out of 4 medial signs are motor. So when you think medial, when you think about the medial symptoms, you should really think about motor. Medial motor, and mostly contralateral. With the exception of the eyes and cranial nerves, everything else, the main signs and symptoms you see, are gonna be contralateral. Great, now let's move on to the second phrase in the rule. This one is all about the lateral brainstem. And it says that there are 4 lateral structures and they all start with an S. And this is very easy to remember because they're all to the side. So side S, side S. Now, these are first the spinocerebellar tract, the spinothalamic tract, the sympathetic pathway, and the sensory nuclei of some cranial nerves. Now, let's walk through them. First, we have the spinocerebellar tract. Damage here causes ipsilateral ataxia. Then we have the spinothalamic tract. A lesion here produces contralateral loss of pain and temperature sensation. Third is the sympathetic pathway. When affected, it causes ipsilateral Horner syndrome. The triad, as you might remember, is meiosis, ptosis, and hydrosis. Meiosis, ptosis, and hydrosis. And finally, we have the sensory nuclei of some cranial nerves, especially the trigeminal nerve. When damaged, it leads to ipsilateral loss of pain and temperature sensation on the face. Now, you can think of some mnemonics to remember these findings. An easy one might be FAT, but the important thing to remember is that everything besides pain and temperature is ipsilateral, okay? Awesome. Now let's do a couple of quick cases to test everything we've learned. Case 1. A patient shows up with right-sided limb ataxia, right-sided Horner syndrome, facial sensory loss on the right, and pain and temperature loss on the left side of the body. Where is the lesion? That's right, the lesion is in the right lateral brainstem. Case number 2. Another patient presents with left-sided hemiparesis, decreased proprioception on the same side, and right-sided internuclear ophthalmoplegia. Where is the lesion? That's right, is in the right medial brainstem. Great, now let's move on to the final rules. These deal mostly with the vertical axis and have everything to do with the cranial nerves. Rule number 3 says specifically that there are 4 cranial nerves in the medulla oblongata, 4 in the pons, and 4 above the pons. This one is the easiest one to remember because it's fairly logical and it's very simple. You just need to remember that they go in a descending order. But be careful with a couple of tiny details to remember. The first one is that the cranial nerves 1 and 2 aren't in the midbrain. They belong to the forebrain. That's why the rule says that there are 4 above the pons instead of that there are 4 in the midbrain. And secondly, keep in mind that cranial nerve 8 is not only involved in pontine syndromes, as the image shows, but also in medullary syndromes. That is actually really important, and I know that it kind of messes up the whole rule, but it's really important because in medullary syndromes, particularly in lateral medullary syndromes, the vestibular component of cranial nerve 8 is really fundamental, and we'll talk about that later in the video. And finally, the fourth rule says that some cranial nerve nuclei are medial and others are lateral. Now, how do you tell? Well, it's very simple. If the cranial nerve number divides evenly into 12, it's medial. So that includes, of course, cranial nerve 3, 4, 6, and 12. All of the others are lateral. By the way, these are precisely the cranial nerves we were referring to when we discussed the first rule that said that the medial region contains some motonuclear of some cranial nerves. Well, these were those cranial nerves, okay? Now, maybe you want a quick refresher of what happens when each of these cranial nerves is damaged, so here's a quick summary. But if you want a deep review of each nerve and how to test them, I suggest you check out Lecturio's physical exam series. It's fantastic and it's a very thorough resource to learn all of this. That said, let's move on to some cases to test everything we've learned. Okay, let's break this down. First, medial or lateral? Well, hemiparesis and loss of vibration and proprioception suggests medial, and they're contralateral signs, right? So since the symptoms are on the right, the lesion has to be on the left. So medial left side. Now let's think about a vertical level. What gives it away? That's right, the tongue deviation. That means the hypoglossal nerve is involved, and this nerve, as you may remember, is in the medulla oblongata. So we're in the left medial medulla. A classical medial medullary syndrome, also known as Dejerine syndrome. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, so same thing. First, what's the horizontal axis? Medial or lateral? Well, the presence of ataxia, Horner syndrome, facial sensory loss, and contralateral body sensory loss all suggest lateral, particularly a right lateral syndrome. Now, what about the vertical level? Where do you think we are? Well, the two key findings are signs of cranial nerve 7 and 8 involvement. How do we know that? Well, first we have facial palsy, which suggests a cranial nerve 7 involvement. And we also have vestibular and cochlear signs. The vestibular signs are vertigo and nystagmus, and the cochlear signs are hearing loss. So all of that suggests 7 and 8 involvement. And where are the cranial nerve 7 and 8 located? Well, in the pons. That means we're dealing with a lateral pontine syndrome. Now, up to this point, we've looked at pretty clean textbook-style cases, but real-life and board-like questions aren't always that neat. So for this last case, I grabbed a real clinical vignette from Lecturio's question bank. Let's see how I do with that. Okay, so if you answered lateral medulla, you nailed it. Why? Well, ataxia plus Horner and pain and temperature loss is equal to lateral syndrome, right? And the horizontal nystagmus suggests a cranial nerve 8 involvement. Wait, but didn't you say that cranial nerve 8 is in the pons? Yes, but remember that I told you one exception to keep in mind earlier? Keep in mind that cranial nerve 8 is not only involved in pontine syndromes, as the image shows, but also in medullary syndromes. Well, I said that precisely because of this syndrome. You see, this is a Wallenberg syndrome, a lateral medullary stroke. And although in paper these cases can present with cranial nerve 9 to 11 involvement, in practice and in most exams that rarely happens. Most cases just present like this, with lateral findings plus vestibular compromise and nothing else. So if you see this presentation, suspect Wallenberg syndrome. It's much more common than a lateral pontine syndrome, and if they want you to answer that, if they want you to answer lateral pontine syndrome, trust me, they're going to mention a facial palsy. But hey, you don't have to take my word for it. With Lecturio, you can test that for yourself. Just go to the topic you're studying, click start, and you'll get a curated set of clinical cases built to help you practice and test yourself on whatever you're learning. If you like, you could actually go there right now and keep learning about strokes, neuroanatomy, neurology, or whatever other topic you fancy. And that's it for this video. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.